Katy Perry isn't in her flop era anymore. That would imply that an end is in sight. This is just her flop reality, an ongoing state of delusion broadcasted in 4K. Let's revisit Katy's headlines as of late, shall we? Katy Perry going to space on the Jeff Bezos fake feminist narcissist exploration extravaganza Blue Origin while the world melts down. Katy Perry releasing a lead single in 2024 called Woman's World, produced by Dr. Luke, known antagonist of women in the music industry. Katy Perry launching a tour off the back of a critically panned album, the worst reviewed female album in Metacritic's history that tanked so hard it can only be described as AI-generated empowerment slop. There is something deeper than just bad public relations going on here. Katy Perry has become an emblem of the delusional, out-of-touch celebrity in 2025. No matter how strong the pushback is to her specific way of conducting herself in public, she refuses to alter her performance of self or to simply go away for a while. Instead of reassessing her vibes and figuring out what her audience actually wants from her, we are instead subjected to her whims and desires simply because she is famous and because she can take up space. That's not a good enough reason to do nonsense in 2025. People are tired, people are angry, and there's not many places for that outrage to go. So publicly touting your idiotically out of touch with reality of the world credentials by, for example, saying you're putting the ass in astronaut as you go for a multi-million-dollar Disney World ride to look at the world like it's an aquarium is a very bad idea. You're setting yourself up. Katy has no one to blame but herself for the way that she's being received, which is why I have very little sympathy for her. But speaking of public relations, someone hates her really bad. Katy's own team is delusionally out of touch with her public perception. Her label A&R from Capitol Records, Chris, recently revealed that he suggested that Katy collaborate with Dr. Luke for 143. And a lot of her fans are rejoicing this information because they finally have someone to blame the embarrassment of collaborating with him on. But at the end of the day, it was Katy's choice to reunite with Dr. Luke. She knows exactly why he is a hated figure in the public. She is intimately privy to the details, having been embroiled in the lawsuit with Kesha. I'll get more into this later on. But what really struck me about this interview with Chris, where he admitted this, and his comments were how there was an entire room of people, a whole label behind her saying, you know what? Women's World sounds great. That's exactly what the world needs right now. You and your whipped cream bra to save the day. In fact, the label, according to Chris, still believes there's some secret hit lurking on the track list that will be saved by the Lifetimes tour, which is struggling to sell, by the way. He's saying, get her into the studio for the next album pronto. He's saying that the bad reception was a targeted media campaign to tear her down. Oh, the delusion is leaping. No, babe, the music sucked. This is not a team. This is a trap. There's either a saboteur in the dugout or a total absence of taste at the very tippy top. Katy's career, and 143 especially, feels like a relic of an old pop playbook that people just have grown weary of. Audiences today aren't craving escapism for escapism's sake. They want pop that feels plugged in, not necessarily political, but aware, or at the very least, not delusional enough to claim that it's saving the day while its stars making headlines for lawsuits for associating with billionaires and brand partnerships that contradict every so-called empowerment anthem they've released. We've evolved past the era of label-approved messaging and empty feel-good feminism. Gen Z is media literate to the point of hypervigilance. They know when they're being sold a lie, and they resent that. But more than accountability, they want clarity. They want their idols to stand on business, to say it with their chest, to make choices that reflect a coherent worldview, or at the very least, to stop insulting ours. Case in point, Katy Perry's vaguely liberal, crystal-charged girl boss feminism. After years of evicting nuns from your property, backing a billionaire in an election, and proudly working with a noted alleged woman terrorizer, you're putting the ass in astronaut comment while saying, oh my goddess, while floating in space in full glam feels not just dated, but it feels delusional. It's not even girl boss feminism, it's girl boss cosplay. The girl boss got laid off 10 years ago. Stop insulting everyone's intelligence by trying to pretend you have a greater mission, you're here for Mother Earth, you're one of us, when selling us something we don't even want. We are not streaming the music. We are not buying tickets to the shows. And today's question is, how does a pop star, after murdering their career, alienate their audience so thoroughly that the general public just stops rooting for her altogether? When did the spectacle and the cringe of Katy Perry stop being fun? And when did the audience stop laughing with her and start laughing at her? Because teenage dream Katy Perry was beloved. Cheesy, sure, cartoonish, definitely, but she was in on the bit. She made the bops. She knew her job. And somewhere along the way, That self-awareness that she was liked for evaporated, and what's left is someone who still believes she can trade on nostalgia, on a few diamond singles, on a whipped cream bra, and have it mean the same thing that it did in 2010. But it doesn't. The world moved on and the audience evolved, but Katy Perry didn't evolve with it. What's currently taking place is a very public, drawn-out rupture between a pop star and her people. Katy Perry has stopped reading the room, she has doubled down on her bad instincts, and that disconnect between the image she's selling and the world we're actually living in has turned her from a beloved cultural figure into the internet's laughingstock. Now, some of you, particularly the Katy Perry stans who love to swarm my comments when you should be streaming her music, might say, well, it's just pop music. It's not that serious. Who cares if a pop star is annoying? We can't hold her to the standards of being an activist, for example, which I would never do. I would never do that on this channel. But I can hear this rebuttal before I even get into the section of this video which discovers the girl boss feminism of it all. I'm not demanding ideological purity from Katy Perry. I don't expect celebrities to be incredible activists, but I do want coherence. When Katy positions herself as a feminist force and she markets her brand, makes money on empowerment, it's fair to interrogate the dissonance between that message and her actual choices. If she just wanted to sing bubblegum pop and call it a day, that's fine, but she doesn't. She keeps telling us that she's here to raise the vibration of humanity. Today's video isn't about getting the marshmallows and enjoying the roast, although, there is an element of that. It's about understanding why this has happened to Katy Perry and why people feel so frustrated about her. This is my cultural diagnosis. Katy's story is a case study in how branding, hypocrisy, and cultural tone deafness can alienate even the most captive audience. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Zach. I'm the Swiftologist. I make thoughtful weekly videos. This is a follow-up to my How to Murder Your Career Katy Perry video, where I did an almost hour-and-a-half deep dive into how exactly she destroyed her music career. We're taking a little bit of a zoomed out approach today and talking about the Blue Origin spaceflight and how Katy has become an emblem of the out-of-touch celebrity. But before we get any further into this video, I have to let you know that Snare's tour tickets are on sale. Yes, that's right. Me and Madeline, co-host of the podcast Evolution of a Snake, we are going on tour very soon. We're literally going on tour next month. We can't wait to see you in New York, in DC, in Boston, in LA, in Nashville, in Atlanta, in Madison, in Chicago, in Seattle, in San Francisco. We are so excited to get on the road and see you. DC and LA are already sold out. There are low ticket warnings for Boston and New York City, and we can't wait to see you there. So go to evolutionofasnake.com to get your tickets, and keep your eyes peeled to that website because we have some tour merch coming out next week. Let's start out with Katy Perry's loser behaviors. Katy Perry has been engaging in loser behaviors for years. I can't think of a nicer way to describe this carry-on, but loser behavior to me is a public stunt or a gimmick that ends up making you look stupid, shallow, and out of touch as a celebrity in a bid to get attention. There are plenty of examples of this in pop culture. The Blue Origin excursion is the best recent one in my mind, but consider also the Imagine video during COVID. Katy has actually been doing Imagine video behaviors for a very, very long time. Let's set the scene. If Teenage Dream was Katy Perry at her absolute peak, 5 number ones, Candy Color Perfection, global dominance, then Witness was the sound of the wheels coming off loudly, publicly, in slow motion, taking a nun out on the highway. She had taken a few years off after Prism, and in that time, the world had really shifted beneath her. Streaming had exploded, song structures were mutating, hip-hop had overtaken pop, and a new generation of artists, Post Malone, Cardi B, and even Taylor Swift, were adapting fast. Pop was becoming darker, weirder, more internet native, and meanwhile, politics had crashed headfirst into culture. Trump had just been elected into his first term, #MeToo movement was beginning to take root, people were angry and anxious, and they were looking for art with teeth. Katy Perry ended up being one of the first pop girls that released a full era during this period of time, and her initial response was a Max Martin-produced disco track with vaguely anti-complacency lyrics packaged under the label of Purposeful Pop. Chained to the Rhythm, this song that I'm talking about, wasn't bad, it just didn't mean anything. And in this new cultural moment, not meaning anything was kind of the biggest sin of all. From there, things only got worse. The rest of Witness was a confused mix of half-baked social commentary, clapbacks to Taylor Swift, and hollow sexual empowerment anthems, but also a desperate need to rebrand that just didn't stick. She kept telling us this was a new era, that she'd cut her hair, that she had a message, but the only thing that came through loud and clear was her panic. And then came the Witness livestream. If Witness was the beginning of Katy Perry's flop era, then the Witness worldwide livestream was her masterpiece of cringe. The moment when it all came together and created a perfect storm. Bad music, bad vibes, bad public relations, and a truly staggering detachment from the world around her, streamed live 24/7 for 4 full days in what was pitched as a bold, immersive, pop culture, very expensive experiment a la Big Brother, Katy moved into a camera rig department and invited the world to watch her be herself. 41 cameras, zero self awareness, and publicist apparently not on speed dial. What ensued wasn't just boring or overproduced, it was unhinged. In fact, it was probably underproduced. Katy Perry crying on camera during a therapy session saying she didn't want to be Katy Perry anymore, but failing to come up with who she actually was in replacement. Katy Perry talking publicly about how applying her makeup is a feminist revolution. Katy Perry, who put the ass in astronaut, earnestly asking an astrophysicist if math had anything to do with science. The entire thing had the energy of a hostage situation, except the only thing being held captive was her sense of reality. At one point, she literally said, live streaming is the most present form of media, as if we'd all just discovered the internet. She was accompanied by celebrities who dropped in like NPCs in a Sims expansion pack. James Corden eating cow tongue, Caitlyn Jenner coming in to have debates at the dinner table, Sia wandering around looking crazy. There were skincare tutorials set to her own music, pancake portraits, face masks, dance breaks, and a dinner party that could only be described as Burning Man for people with IMDb pages. But beyond the surrealism and the celebrity cameos, what made the livestream truly revealing was how accidentally dystopian it all felt. Katy was trying to sell authenticity in the most inauthentic format imaginable. Every moment was pre-orchestrated, every conversation set up to reveal something that Katy wanted to say. Every emotional beat felt like part of the rollout. She wasn't pulling back the curtain, she was selling us a new kind of curtain and saying it wasn't there. And worst of all, she just kept talking, explaining, rationalizing, justifying. You could really see her spiraling in real time, desperate to be liked, desperate to be understood, desperate to convince us that this mess meant something. She wasn't promoting an album, she was begging for the relevance that she had slowly been losing through the album release so far. She tried to bridge the gap between Katy Perry and Katherine Hudson, but instead what we saw wasn't vulnerability, it was a branding exercise dressed up as a nervous breakdown. There's a difference between being real and being seen, and Witness Worldwide was proof that she just didn't know which one she was aiming for. To her fans, it was disorienting. To casual viewers, it was hilarious. To the culture at large, it was the confirmation we didn't know we were waiting for. Katy Perry was no longer the joke-telling, candy-coated pop queen who was in on the joke. She was the joke. There are so many priceless memes that came out of this. I mean, the blonde haircut being a way to ruin your career, that is thanks to the flop of this era. In a moment when the world was spiraling politically, socially, and economically, Katy Perry's answer was to stream herself eating avocado toast and making frog noises with her neck, and then demand that we receive her music as purposeful. It wasn't purpose. It was pure flop energy, broadcast, again, in high resolution. This wasn't a turning point in her career. It was a mirror held up to it, and what it reflected back was someone who had just lost the plot completely. Not just a bad rollout, not just a bad album, a full-scale, multi-camera unraveling of a pop star who didn't realize that the culture had moved on and that she wasn't invited to the next act. So why did her act work in 2010 but not in 2017? Well, it wasn't that she wasn't invited to the next act, it's more that she missed the boat. The kind of feminist rhetoric that Katy Perry engages with from 2010 until now, because remarkably, her understanding of her own politics has not evolved, has gone out of fashion. We talk a lot about girl boss feminism on this channel, often derisively, but I don't think I've ever properly explained what my understanding of it is and why I think celebrities cling to it. So let's do that. First and foremost, celebrities cling to girl boss feminism because it flatters them and it doesn't challenge them. It lets them feel powerful without challenging power structures. For someone like Katy, feminism is not about dismantling the machine, it's about being the woman who is allowed to drive the machine. There is a great dissertation I came across that I will link down below called Theorizing Girl Boss Culture by Frankie Mastrangelo. In it, the author explains that girl boss antics offer a version of feminism that celebrates individual success within existing systems of power, a perspective that's tailor-made for celebrities and rich people. Basically, if I'm Katy Perry, it makes me feel good to equate my personal financial success and industry dominance with female empowerment. Why? Because it lets me position myself as one of the good ones, fighting the good fight without actually having to fight for anything. It's a feminism of vibes, not substance. Lifestyle feminism, as bell hooks might call it. Katy's brand of feminism has always centered around her own personal journey, which is convenient because it allows her to ignore all of the structural conditions that make it impossible for most other women to replicate her success. Again, not about dismantling the machine, it's about being the woman who gets to drive it. Pop stars love this version of feminism. It requires no sacrifice. It's not about the redistribution of power or resources. It's only about visibility, being seen. Simply existing in a space becomes the win, as if presence alone is a substitute for progress. So when Katy Perry says, I'm putting the ass in astronaut, and gleefully announces that she's part of the first all-female space crew, we're supposed to treat this like a moment of feminist triumph, like a sign of progress. But what does it actually do? What gets challenged, changed, or materially improved by sending a woman in a snatched catsuit to orbit Earth on a billionaire's vanity rocket, not doing any scientific research. No. Nothing. Literally nothing. If anything, it's a net negative. It promotes the privatization of space. It glorifies a grotesque form of wealth hoarding. It is wasteful. It is self-indulgent and insulting to anyone paying attention to what else is going on in this world. But we're supposed to giggle and ask whether Katy's lashes are going to stay on in zero gravity. What is feminist about that? And this is where Katy Perry's whole Purposeful pop rebrand completely collapses. Any resistance that she has ever tried to adopt is purely aesthetic. She commodifies rebellion without ever engaging with the systems that actually make life hard. She wants credit for raising awareness, the success of having women's world in her mind go #1, without ever asking what exactly she's raising awareness for. Screaming "take up space" while you're literally being shot into space by Jeff Bezos isn't subversive, it's satire. And look, Katy is not the only one guilty of this kind of feminism. Taylor Swift has absolutely engaged in this type of feminism as branding too. But Katy has doubled down and made it her whole thing, even as the culture has moved on. It's not just sprinkled on top of her career, it's baked into the cake. It's the scaffolding that props up songs like Woman's World, which are somehow both hollow and self-righteous at the same time. And when those songs flop, she is allowed to frame the backlash as anti-feminist. Don't like Woman's World? You must hate women. Girl. No, we hate bad music. The problem is the world has wised up to these ways. The girl boss era ended years ago. And for whatever reason, despite getting caught on the Jumbotron smack cam a million times, Katy Perry doesn't know that. All right, here's another thing. You are who you hang out with. I don't necessarily believe always that people are guilty by association. Life is messy, relationships are complicated, and it's possible to coexist with problematic people without fully co-signing everything they've ever done. But in pop culture, optics are everything, and Katy Perry's optics are horrendous. Time and time again, she aligns herself with people, brands, and institutions that completely undermine the empowerment rhetoric she loves to slap on her music. It's one thing to make bad choices, it's another to pretend that your bad choices are good for the world. And this is the thing about Katy Perry. She is constantly trying to sell you enlightenment, empowerment nonsense. She's Mother Gaia with a CoverGirl contract. Every song has to be a mantra. Every rollout has to have a hashtag. But behind this spiritual, feminine, divine girl boss cosplay is someone whose actual choices, especially behind the scenes, make her entire enterprise feel fraudulent. Case in point, Dr. Luke. Even if you want to set aside the deeply disturbing allegations made by Kesha, I stand with Kesha, I believe Kesha, allegations that sparked an industry-wide reckoning and left an irreversible stain on Dr. Luke's reputation, you still have to reckon with the mountain of public testimony from other female artists about how difficult, unpleasant, and outright traumatic it was to work with him. Take Kelly Clarkson, unproblematic queen. She has openly spoken about how her label forced her to collaborate with Dr. Luke, how she cried and begged not to go in the studio with him. She said, "I'll work with anyone else except him." And she talked about how that experience left her feeling cornered and sick. And she even refused to take a songwriting credit that she deserved on her #1 hit, "My Life Would Suck Without You," just so her name wouldn't appear next to his. That is not a normal decision. That is someone burning millions of dollars to draw a line in the sand. That is someone who has principles. And yet, in 2024, Katy Perry proudly reunites with Dr. Luke for her album 143. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was literally dragged into the legal proceedings during Kesha's lawsuit. She knows the context. She knows the narrative as well. Even if she doesn't believe the allegations, she knows what people think about it. And she still chose to platform a man whose industry reputation ranges from predatory to pariah. Katy's A&R, Chris, as I mentioned earlier, recently did an interview where he revealed that he was the one who suggested Dr. Luke as a collaborator. Some fans have latched onto this as evidence that Katy was manipulated by her team. But let's be clear, Katy Perry is not a child. She's a seasoned artist with decades in the business. She has the power to say no. She has worked with plenty of other people that are not Dr. Luke. She chose happily to say yes. And this is what I mean when I say that Katy Perry's public persona is out of sync with her private choices. You cannot sell empowerment on one hand, specifically female empowerment, and turn around and make music with a man whose entire brand now represents the exact opposite of that, especially when you've spent your entire career preaching about being true to yourself, about being strong, about lifting other women up. It's not just disingenuous, It's insulting. And audiences aren't stupid. They feel that dissonance. It creates a barrier, an instinctive mistrust that follows her from album to album. She's smiling at us through a PR-approved lens of girl power glitter, while backstage she's aligning with the men the rest of the industry has quietly or loudly moved on from. She wants the image of resistance without doing any of the actual resisting. In fact, she wants to participate in the structures that make things worse for other women in the industry. At some point, the "I didn't know better" or "I didn't collaborate with him that much" defense runs out, and in Katy's case, it expired about 3 albums ago. Here is the kind of person that Katy Perry is behind the empowerment nonsense. She is someone who cozies up to billionaires like they're misunderstood geniuses instead of what they actually are, parasites in designer suits. She backed Rick Caruso, a luxury mall tycoon worth over $4 billion in his bid for public office, a man whose entire empire is built on selling people aspirational fantasies while pricing real people out of reality. She endorsed him with a smug little voting booth selfie, like she was announcing the drop of a new shoe collab. Who you vote for is not necessarily a problem, but she was trying to encourage other people to co-sign billionaire domination. In 2025, she took things even further, strapping herself into a penis-shaped spaceship and blasting off into the upper atmosphere with Jeff Bezos, his girlfriend, to promote her flop tour, a glorified PR stunt funded by a man who has spent his entire career union busting, avoiding taxes, and turning workers into warehouse drones. But Katy wanted to dress this up as a girl boss empowerment mission. This kind of thing sounds like satire when you describe it out loud, but this is what Katy Perry does. And this isn't about being apolitical or being allowed to have different opinions. This is about aligning yourself with the most cartoonishly villainous class of people alive, the billionaires, who are extraordinarily unpopular with the American public, by the way, the oligarchs, the hoarders of wealth who are actively driving this planet into the ground while selling us apps that deliver groceries. Billionaires are bad for the world, not in a vague, eat the rich kind of way, but in a very literal, tangible way. They exploit labor, they destabilize housing markets, they privatize public services, they avoid paying their fair share of taxes at every turn. They fund disinformation, they crush small businesses, and they buy their way into politics. And Katy Perry is really happy to rub elbows with them. She doesn't just want to rub elbows with them, she wants to endorse them. She wants to spread their message. She wants to glam up their space missions. She wants to host dinner parties with them and still call herself a feminist. And that's what makes her so difficult to take seriously in 2025, because she still wants to talk like she's one of us, like she's spiritually tuned in, connected to the collective, here to just raise our vibrations and center our inner child. You cannot be the voice of the people while actively cozying up to the people who have their boots on our necks. You cannot say you care about women or the planet or the future and go to space with Jeff Bezos. That is not activism. That is not art. It's not even escapism. It's pure evil wrapped in glitter. But you know what? Associations aside, actions speak louder than words. If you really want to put her affiliations aside, why don't we just take a look at what kind of person Katy Perry is while examining her latest legal struggles? How about when she evicted an 84-year-old veteran from his home while he was recovering from major back surgery and suffering from Huntington's disease and allegedly in a state of post-operative delirium? That is when Katy decided, we're going to sign the contracts and I'm going to buy your house. The sale of his house to her was signed while he was on opiates, under duress, and likely not mentally competent to agree to a $15 million transaction, allegedly. The details are so grim, so brazenly predatory that a bipartisan group of lawmakers has now proposed an actual law to prevent this from ever happening again, and it's called the Perry Act. That is not a tribute. That is not a VMA Vanguard Award. It's not an honor. It's an acronym. Protecting Elder Realty for Retirement Years. Katy Perry's name is literally being used to warn people against financial abuse of senior citizens. And that's not even the first time she's gone toe-to-toe with an octogenarian. Let's talk about the convent. In 2015, Katy Perry attempted to buy a sprawling estate in Los Angeles that had previously housed the Sisters of the Most Holy and Immaculate Heart of the Blessed Virgin Mary. The nuns didn't want to sell it to her. They had already agreed to sell the property to someone else because, in their words, Katy Perry represents everything we don't believe in. They begged her to walk away. She didn't, and she sued. And during the legal battle, one of the nuns, Sister Catherine Rose, collapsed and died in court. She was 89 years old. Hours before her death, she appeared in a local news interview and made a public plea. Katy Perry, please stop. It's not doing anyone any good. You're hurting a lot of people. That was her last public statement, and Katy still pursued and closed the sale. So let me be crystal clear. This is not normal celebrity behavior. Actually, it kind of is normal celebrity behavior, but it's a step forward. But it's a brazen step forward. She's very public about this. This is actively harmful, and it completely undermines every single empowerment campaign, feminist anthem, and spiritual platitude she's ever tried to sell us. You cannot claim to be raising the collective vibration of humanity while dragging elderly people through the courts and turfing dying veterans veterans out of their homes. That's not raising anything. That's stomping vulnerable people into the ground and calling it fair and square. This is a pattern. If Katy Perry's private decisions betray who she really is, which I think they do, this disconnect is too jarring for audiences to ignore. She wants to be perceived as pure-hearted, light-filled, spiritually evolved, but behind the scenes, the record shows someone who is cutthroat, opportunistic, and deeply insensitive to not just the optics, but the impacts of her own actions. And look, none of this would matter quite as much if she wasn't trying to sell us woman's world and hashtag empowerment. The only reason that these stories hit so hard is because they feel so off-brand. She tells you that she's your cosmic older sister, your manifestation mentor, your empowerment fairy godmother, but in reality, she's Cruella de Vil making fur coats out of the puppies. The flop must end. Here's the thing, pop stars don't need to live stream their nervous breakdowns or tweet through the apocalypse to be relatable. We're not asking for raw vulnerability on a 24/7 camera loop. We're not asking celebrities to sob into ring lights or trauma dump on Instagram Live. I think what we as the public are asking for and what we crave is coherence and consistency. We need to see levels of alignment and authenticity between who people say they are and what they actually do. Authenticity is not about oversharing. It's not about crying on the camera. It's about integrity. If you're going to stand for something, stand for it. Don't slap a rainbow on a single, call it a movement, and then go and run over a nun. Don't sell sisterhood in your lyrics and collaborate with the exact men those sisters are trying desperately to escape from. Do not preach abundance and healing and empowerment and then turn around and campaign for billionaires and go to space for fun. And this goes for every public figure, by the way, not just Katy Perry. If you're courting goodwill and you're trying to stay in the public's good graces in 2025, if you want people to root for you, a word of advice, give them something to root for. No one is too famous to be held accountable anymore. The public's patience is not a renewable resource. The world is a terrible place, and we want to be entertained by our celebrities. We don't want to feel put off and disgusted by them. You do not get infinite flop cards. What makes Katy Perry's case so egregious, so fascinating, and so exhausting is that the public has tried to make their feelings clear. We didn't show up for Witness. We ignored Smile. We aren't streaming 143. We're not buying tickets, and we're not laughing with her anymore. We are laughing at you. We are tired, and still somehow Elle magazine is putting Katy Perry and the space crew of flops on the cover in 2025 with a straight face and letting her say she's putting the ass in astronaut, like we're stupid, like we can't see what's going on. It's insulting. This isn't just a Katy Perry problem, it's a media ecosystem problem. Publications, grow a spine. Stop letting publicists gaslight you into acting like this is normal behavior. It's not. Stop rewarding these catastrophically misaligned rollouts with soft focus features and puff piece interviews. If your cover star is actively alienating the very audience that you're writing for, because you're accountable to your readers, not to the celebrities and the publicists who you talk to on the phone, maybe don't hand her a megaphone. Ask a real question, push back, say no. Stop giving us propaganda in prose form. Your readers, your viewers, your watchers, we can tell. Because what we're witnessing here isn't just the fall of a pop star, it's a refusal to accept the fall, and that is the real tragedy. Katy Perry is not going to be the pop girly who gracefully transitions into legacy icon status. She's not going to be the reclusive queen whose mystique grows with time. She's going to keep giving flop loudly until someone finally takes the mic away. And I'm saying, it's time. It's time to take the mic away. How have you guys been feeling about the Blue Origin spaceflight? Because I got a lot of requests to make this video, so I'm curious to see how you've been feeling about it. How do you think our relationship to celebrity has been changing given, the way the world has been going at the moment? I would love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe. I make thoughtful weekly videos, and go to evolutionofsnake.com to get tickets to my tour. All right, goodbye. See you in the next one.